Hello everybody, my name is Sam Gilk with Bosch Rexroth, and today I'm going to be highlighting a new application available for ctrlX OS. This app is called PROCON-WEB Embedded System, and this is an HTML5 based HMI solution that runs directly on the ctrlX core or ctrlX OS based device. Today I'm going to be giving a brief demo using version 6.6.1. And this embedded runtime for the core is going to require a license. In my case, I have the 100 tag 5 client license, but any of these will work just fine. One other prerequisite is going to be an OPC-UA server running on the core. We're going to use this OPC-UA server to communicate our process variables from the ctrlX data layer down to our PROCON-WEB application. So this will also require a license. I'm using version 1.20.2 on my ctrlX Core X3. And I have the OPC-UA server standard license. The final piece we're going to need to get started is the PROCON-WEB designer tool. So I'm using version 6.6 of the designer, and you will not need a license to work with the embedded system in the PROCON-WEB designer. So with the prerequisites out of the way, let's get started with a demo application. Okay, so I've gone ahead and fired up the PROCON-WEB designer tool for the first time, and this is what you're going to see when you open up the designer. You're going to get this warning for copy protection. So this is looking for a license for your designer. Luckily for us, when we're working with the embedded runtime on the core, we are not going to require a license for the PROCON-WEB designer. We can just select this middle option here, do not search for copy protection again. And it's going to tell us the program works with some limited functions, but it'll have everything that we need to work in the embedded environment. So if we hit OK, we come to the starting page of the designer. And here you can see your project history, a number of tutorials and manuals that Weidmuller has put together for the PROCON-WEB system. For the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to go ahead and create a brand new project from scratch, and we're going to walk through some of the basic functionality to get, the bare minimum HMI up and running on your ctrlX core. So what I'm going to select here is New Project on this top ribbon banner here. And we're presented with a number of template options. So we can select an empty project or a variety that PROCON-WEB has provided for us by default here. But I'm going to start with the empty project, like I said. We'll want to give our project a name. So we're going to call this Demo PROCON. I can type. And then we need to select the target system here. I'll select Embedded Systems. Okay, we have the empty project selected, and then we'll hit OK. You shouldn't get this warning. I'm going to just skip by it. I have installed multiple versions of the PROCON-WEB designer. So now that we have our empty project open, I'm going to go ahead and just give a quick rundown of the UI here in the development environment. So on the top-hand portion of this screen here, on this banner, we have a variety of options that pertain to the tool that you're currently working with. So in this case, we have project environment. We can load and save and open projects. We can back up. A lot of different functionality. We can connect to a target system and deploy our project to the runtime environment. On the left-hand side here, we have the project tree. So this is going to be the hierarchical structure of how your project is organized. If I open up one of these objects here, for example, under user interface, if I open one of the picture classes that is generated by default with the project, you'll see I get a few more panes here. On the bottom hand side, we have the properties of the current element that is selected. So you can see here class 1, and I can look at the various attributes associated with this element and configure them. On the right-hand side is kind of the toolbox to design your HMI screen. So currently you see that there's nothing here because there's nothing on my page. But if I drag down a button here, you'll see that I now have a button in this toolbox. So we'll get more in depth with each of these items as we actually work through building a working HMI. The first piece that I want to walk through is actually making a connection to our ctrlX core OPC-UA server so that we can read and write tags to the data layer. The way to accomplish this is in the project tree under Process Connection, we can enter the Process Variables menu. Here we can view all tags associated with our project. And PROCON-WEB is pretty nice in the fact that it has multiple communication drivers. So first thing I'm going to do is select Driver Selection on the Process Variables menu on the Ribbon menu. And here we can enable the OPC-UA v2 communication driver for PROCON-WEB. Once we enable this, we'll have the option to PLC import. So we can then directly import our tags from our OPC-UA server into our PROCON-WEB project. So I'll select this option here. And this is going to bring us to a new menu for the PLC process variable import. Now the first thing we're going to want to do here is add a new connection to our OPC-UA server. So on the right-hand menu, we have a drop-down to select our driver. We have OPC-UA v2, and then we're going to add a new connection. When we select Add, we come to a pop-up window that prompts us for a URL, a user, and a password. So the URL is going to be the URL of our ctrlX core OPC-UA server. So in this case, it's the IP address at port 4840. We also need a user that has read-write permission to data layer. I'm going to use the default user. Now when I hit connect, you'll notice this error connecting to the OPC-UA server. One or more errors occurred. And the reason for this is we need to trust the OPC-UA server certificate on our ctrlX core side. So this is under Settings, Certificates and Keys, and OPC-UA server in the ctrlX core web UI. So you'll see this rejected certificate coming from PROCON-WEB OPC-UA import. So what I need to do is select Trust here. Now when I come back to PROCON-WEB and I try and connect again, you'll see the connection was established. And now we can browse the OPC-UA tree, including the entire data layer of the core. So what I'm going to use for this demo are a couple of data layer tags. The first is going to be a PLC tag that I've created, which is just a Boolean called btest. And I'm going to use this to demonstrate read and write to the PLC. And the other tags I'm going to use are just a couple of metrics coming off the core. So I'm going to grab the entire system metrics drop down here. Now when I hit apply and then read symbols, you'll see all of those tags populate in the import menu here. So you can see all of their tag names are auto-generated with the whole OPC-UA path. So now I want to import all of these tags into my process variables of my PROCON-WEB project. So a little trick is to hit, rather than doing them one by one, you can hit this mark action row and then, oops, mark action row, right click, import now. Now all of them have been imported. There's quite a few more options here. I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of everything. The default is going to work for 99% of cases. So now you can see in our process tags for our PROCON-WEB project, we have all of those data layer metrics as well as our Boolean PLC program tag. All right, now let's go ahead and actually make a layout and design this HMI and then read and write some tags from the data layer. PROCON-WEB utilizes a object-oriented class instance methodology in their HMI design tools. So the first piece we're going to need when we are constructing our HMI layout is going to be called a picture class. So if you look in the project tree under user interface, you should see this picture classes field. By default, they're going to have created a default picture class and a default navigation class element. So what you'll notice is if I create a picture, so this is going to be an instance of a picture class object. These pictures will inherit all of the properties from the picture class. So to demonstrate this, I'll open up this class 1 default picture class here, and I'll place some text in the editor here. So I'll select a text field and a constant text. This pop-up menu will come up, and this is going to be your class instance editor. So if you see here, I'm working at the class level. So I'll call this just constant text. And if I hit OK, this is going to create an instance of this text object in my picture class. So if I then open up this instance, you'll see I'm working at the instance level. I can also swap over here and edit at the class level. For now, I will just stick with the instance and I'll call this constant text 1, and I'll give it a value of test. Now you can see I have some text here. It says test, and it's part of my, it's actually applied to my default picture class called class 1. So what you'll notice is if I create a new picture, and again, this is going to be an instance of a picture class, I'll be prompted to select which picture class I'd like to inherit from. So I'll select class 1. And again, I'll be provided this pop-up menu where I can name my picture. So I'll just call this class 1 or class 1 instance. And now you'll see I have this picture class 1 instance and this text is already there. However, it's uneditable because it's inherited from its parent class. So I actually can't modify this at this point. But hopefully that demonstrates the class instance methodology here. It'll make more sense as we build out the entire HMI project. So with that, let's go ahead and create our default picture classes, and then we'll move on and create pictures that have unique content inside of them. And they'll just be inheriting some default parameters from their parent object. So for example, the size of the picture will be inherited. All right, let's go ahead and do that. Now that we have a grasp on this class instance principle, let's go ahead and make the picture classes for our HMI project. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this existing class 1 instance because we won't be using this in the project. I'm also going to delete the text off of the class 1 here because we don't want that propagating through all of our picture instances that are inheriting from it. So I'll delete that. I'm going to rename this to whole picture. And all I'm going to be setting here is the dimension. So this is going to actually be the size of our display. And I'm going to set this to 1600 pixels in X by 700 pixels, or actually 900 pixels in Y, sorry. Okay. Next, I'm going to edit the existing navigation element. I'm going to change a couple things here. First, I'm just going to make it a little bit taller, 150 by 90 pixels. And I'm also going to make it, rather than have this kind of gray background, I'm going to make it transparent, or sky blue rather. Okay, so we have these two. Next, I'm going to make a picture class for our actual picture content. So I'm going to call it picture content. And this one is also going to have the same X dimension, but it's going to only be 700 pixels tall, because we're going to have a header and a footer of size 100 pixels above and below this picture content. All right, and then finally, I'm going to add a picture class for our header elements. So you'll see how we're going to utilize these once I actually create the layout, but I'm going to call this class header status. I'm going to make it a transparent background because we want all of the content in the class instances to show through regardless. And then I'm going to set the dimension to 200 by 100 pixels. So it should look something like this. Okay, so we have our picture classes. The next step is going to be creating the content that is going to fill out our actual HMI. So we're going to add a few controls, so numeric fields, buttons, and we're going to link them to our process variables that we already imported over OPC-UA. So our data layer metrics and our PLC Boolean. The first picture instance we're going to create is for our first content page. So under pictures, under user interface in the project tree, I'll right click and select new picture. And I want to inherit from the picture content class. I'll select OK. And then I come to this new instance, picture 2 of my picture content class. And I'll just call this picture content 1. It's the first instance of this class. Okay, so now let's add a few controls to this picture. So the first I'm going to add is just an image, just to show you how you could display graphic elements or SVGs in your project. So I right-clicked this control here. It's called an image view, and then I'll create a graphic element. Wait for this to load. All right. So we have this image view, and we can select an image here if we just always want every instance to use the same image. I'm not going to do that. I'll set the image based on the instance level. So we have an image view. You can see it up here. And now when I edit at the instance level, image view 1, I'll select the image. So you can browse through a number of graphics, or you can import. I've already, or here, I guess I haven't. I'll go ahead and import just a couple of pictures that I have here. So we'll grab this one. And now I'll select the chrysanthemum picture to display. So you'll see when I first import it, it's absolutely massive. And that's because I have this scaling set super large. So first we'll drop it down, just make it 1-to-1. I think that's still going to be way too big. So I'll scale it down even further. We'll make it 0.2 maybe in each axis. Okay. So I have something like this. And I can drag it around, or I could hard code the position using the editor here. All right, so that's how you import a picture. Next, let's look at adding some display variables. So the first thing I will do is add a numeric digit here. We're going to display some of our system metrics from the ctrlX core. So this is a numeric digit class. I'm not going to set anything at the class level. We'll have this here. And now I'll edit at the instance level the position. So I'll just use some even numbers here, 50, 40. And I can select the tag that I'd like to display here. I'll also change the name to numeric digit 1. And let's grab the CPU utilization percentage. Maybe that'll be a better name for the instance, CPU util. Okay. So now we have that tag linked to this. One other piece I'll show you is how you can use custom styles across a number of controls. So in the project tree, you have this style guide, and I'll select simple controls because that's what this numeric digit control is a simple control. And here we have, this is one I'd already created. I'm just going to delete it to show you how to do it again. So we have tag display here. That's what this control is using. And we can see that by opening up again this instance. And if we go back to the class level, the display, if we select design, we can see tag display default. Now I want to have a different theme here, different styling than the default. So I'll come back to my simple controls style guide editor. And to create a new style, I'll right click here and create new style for the tag display. Okay. And here I'll just call this demo as the variation name. And then all I'm going to do in this case is add a frame around this display. So you can select frame activate, and you can set the styles for all of the different states of the control as well. I'll just work with the default just to demonstrate this. And then the other thing I'm going to change is the background color. Rather than transparent, I'm going to select a white background. Okay. Now if we go back to this picture instance, and I select, I should now have demo available as a tag display style. So I'll select that. And now we're using my custom style there on this numeric display. And we are linked to the data layer framework system CPU utilization percentage and using the tag display demo style. So I'm just going to copy paste Control-C, Control-V a couple of times here, and we'll link to some of our other metrics. So the first one, let's find a metric here. I'll grab the memory used percentage. And I'll also give these percentages a unit of percent. And I'll call this mem util. And lastly here, let's grab one other metric. We'll just grab the total system memory used. I'll just call this mem used. Okay. And now something we can do is align all these controls to each other. So the alignment works where it's going to align to the first control selected. So I selected the top, I'll control click the next one and the next one. And then the alignment menu is on the top right here. So I'll do align right. Now all of my controls are aligned to the right side. Okay, great. So now we have our first picture content created. So let's create a second one so we can navigate between them. So again, I'll create a new picture instance and I'll select picture content. And I'll call this one picture content 1 or 2. I'm sorry. And sorry, I'm going back and forth between screens. My pop-ups are coming up on my second display, so I'm dragging them over. Okay, so now we're working on our second picture content screen. For this one, all I'm going to do is have a checkbox, and this is going to display the value of our PLC Boolean. So I'll just call this checkbox. Okay. And then I'll edit at the instance level. I'll call this PLC bool. And I will select our PLC Boolean tag. And as you can see in the tag selection, it actually filters by data type. So that's pretty nice. So we have our PLC Boolean selected. And I also am going to add a display text, which is just going to say PLC bool. Okay, so now we have this checkbox that's linked to our PLC bool. This is just a display, but instead let's actually add a button that can toggle that value on our ctrlX PLC. So I'm going to create a button element, call this just button, and I'm going to just set it to 100 by 80. We'll use all the default styles. We have something like this. I'll actually change it to a little different background color. In order to do that, I'll have to create a new style, it looks like. So we'll just leave it as is. I think people will be able to see it well enough. So what we want to do here is actually link this to this function on released. We can set the action to invert the Boolean, and we want to point it again to our tag. So it's going to toggle between the true and false state on that Boolean value. Okay. And I'll give this one some text as well. We'll just say, is it here? Oh, text top. We're going to have toggle. And in the bottom, we'll have PLC bool. All right. Oh, sorry, that was in the wrong location here. Toggle PLC bool. There we go. All right, so now we have two picture contents. In the next section, we're going to look at creating a couple items to have in our header that are going to inherit from the header status picture class. So the first item we're going to add to our header is a datetime display. In order to do that, we'll come to our pictures and we'll select new picture. And then we are going to use the header status as the parent class here. So we'll just call this status time. And what we're going to put in here is a numeric display that's going to reference the system datetime. So I'll come up to our simple controls, add a numeric digit, and I'm going to call this class datetime. I'll then select the system tag current UTC time. So in this tag browser, you can select from your manually configured tags or the system tags using this selection menu on the top. Current UTC time. And then for number system, rather than decimal, I want to format this in datetime format. All right. So here is our datetime status widget that we've just created. All right, so that's all that we need there. The next one is going to be a navigation widget. And I think a good way to think about these pictures is kind of like a composite widget. So you're adding multiple components from your base picture classes to a reusable picture here. So again, I'm going to inherit from the header status. And I'm going to call this one status nav. Okay. And in this picture, I'm going to add two buttons, one to move to the previous display and one to move to the next display. So to do that, I will create a new button, simple control, and I'll call this one nav forward. And in this case, I'm going to select a bitmap image of a forward-facing arrow. So now this is a preview of the button icon. When I press this button, the onReleased function handler, I want to be navigate forward. All right. So now we have our forward navigation button. Similarly, I'm going to do the same, but for backwards navigation. So again, new button. We'll call this nav back. I'll select the bitmap icon of the backwards arrow. And then for my action, I want to navigate backwards. Okay, and I'll just align these together to the top. And there we go. So now that we have all of our pictures configured, we can go ahead and add them all together into what is called a layout in PROCON-WEB. So you'll notice we already have this default start layout. And if I right-click and mark the picture class, you'll see that this layout is based on the full picture class. If we wanted to create a new layout, what we'll do is add a container to a picture. So I'll create a new picture. Again, I'll use the full picture class. It's going to look like this. And then I'm going to add a container control. Okay. You should see, once this loads, a container is now placed in my picture. And you'll see that this picture has now also become a layout. For the purpose of this demo, though, we'll just stick using the single layout. But in the case that you have multiple display sizes or something like that, you may want to have multiple layouts. So I will delete this picture as well as this container. All right, So let's start working on our start layout. The first piece I want to make is a header. So this is going to sit at the top of our HMI screen on all screens. So to create a header, I'm going to use what's called a picture area control. I'll select this here, and I'll name this class header. All right. Now the size, I want it to span the entire width of my full picture, which is 1600 pixels, and the height I'm going to have at 100 pixels. Now you'll see this field picture list below. So you could configure this at the instance level, but let's just say I'm going to use this same header the same way across the project. So I'll place this configuration on the class level. And what I want to do when I select this button here on my second monitor that I'm dragging over, I'll have this picture selection menu. And the pictures I want to select are our status widgets. So I'll move over status time and status nav. And now when I select OK, you'll see my header here. And what you'll notice is the navigation is missing. And that is because I want the layout to float rather than fill. So the preview is very small, but now you can see, okay, I have my date time status widget on the left side and my navigation on the right. So just to clean this up a little bit, I'm going to set the position to 0, 0, and I'm going to set the background color to like a black or a dark gray. Okay, so that looks pretty good. The next piece is going to be our footer. So in this case, I'm going to use a container control. And I'll call this footer. And the container type here is not going to be picture, but navigation, because this is where we're going to place our navigation widgets to select screens by number rather than just using the forward-backward navigation controls. Again, we're going to use layout float with a 5 by 5 pixel space between each of them. And I will also select the same background color, so this matches the header. So here's our footer. And then I want to place it at 0x. I want it on the far left side of the screen. And then I want it at 800y because we have a header occupying space 0 to 100 in y. We have our main content occupying the next 700 pixels, which takes us to 800. And also, I want it to span the entire width of the screen, which is 1600 pixels. Okay, so here's our footer. Next, I'm going to create the content section, which is going to occupy this middle portion of the screen. So again, I'm going to create a container, and this one is going to be called content. And here, I will be using a picture container with layout fill. Again, I want this container to span the entire width of the larger picture, and I want a height of 700 pixels. So here is now my content. In order to position it precisely here, I'm going to put my content instance at a position of 0 in x and 100 in y. Okay, so this is our base layout here. Now, in order to actually fill out this content section using our picture content, we need to set up navigation, and that will come in the following section. The next step is to create navigation elements to navigate between our two different picture content screens. To do that, I'm going to right-click the navigation elements in the project tree, and I'll select New Navigation Element. I'll then select the parent class, which is Navigation1, as defined in our picture classes up here, and then select OK. I'm going to get a pop-up menu once this loads, and I'll call this Screen 1 for my instance. All right, so then we have this navigation element. In order to distinguish it from the other one, for the user, I'm going to add a piece of constant text. And this is something I've brushed over in the past, but these are the existing control classes that I've created. So I can just drag over a constant text class that has nothing configured here, and I will set the value to 1. All right, so there we go. Our first navigation element is done. I'll do the same thing for screen number 2. So new navigation element, select my only navigation element class, and then in the class configuration menu, once this loads, I will call this screen 2 for my instance, drag over some constant text, resize it, and I will give this a value of 2. All right, so we've got our 2 navigation elements. So the final piece here is under device configuration and navigation. I'll open up this menu, and you can see here we can configure and link our navigation elements to our various pictures and content on our layouts. So we have a few different options here for navigation configurations. So we have our default, which is going to be using our start picture. And then we also have a couple for tablet or smartphone. For this demo, I'm just going to set it up for the default device configuration, but you could have multiple layouts and set up completely different navigation and device configurations using this menu here. So I have my default device configuration selected, and I'm going to right-click down here and add a new navigation element. All right, so then I'm going to select the layout that I'd like to use. This is going to be the default layout that we can see here in our starting picture. This is the layout contained. So I'll select that default layout. Then I'll select on the footer, I want this navigation element, screen 1, to take me to my content, picture content 1. So I'll move that over. So there's our first screen. I'll do the same thing for the second screen. Add a new navigation element. I'm going to use the same layout by default. I'll select screen 2 and picture content 2. Okay, so now you can see our second picture content displays in our content area of our layout when I'm on screen 2. And then I navigate to screen 1 and we see the screen 1 content. Okay, so the final step will be to publish this project onto our ctrlX core PROCON-WEB embedded runtime and then test it in the browser. In order to build this project and push it up to my ctrlX core, I'm going to come to the Project Environment tab and then select my target system. I'll type in the IP address of my ctrlX core if it is not there already. Select OK. And then select Connect. I should see Try Connect and connected to the target system. Then I will select this Transfer Project to Target System button here. This will build the project if it's not already, and then transfer it to my ctrlX core embedded runtime. Okay, at this point, the project should be available to view in the browser. So I'll open up my ctrlX Core Web UI. I'll select the PROCON-WEB ES tab in the Web UI here, and then HMI. This will open up my project. So you can see our two screens here. Our navigation buttons are working as expected. We can move back and forward using the toggles or the bottom navigation buttons here. But one thing you'll notice is, okay, our data is not showing up here, and I'm unable to write this PLC Boolean. And the reason for this is just like for the tag import, we also need to accept under certificates and keys, OPC UA server, we need to trust the Weidmuller GTI ctrlX Core web browser certificate. So we'll trust this. And now when I come back to the HMI in the browser, I should see my values updating, and I'm able to read and write the PLC Boolean. And I'll prove this to you by going to the data layer, PLC, application. Here's my B test that we've linked to in the project. You can see it's false here, also false here. If I toggle it, it's now true in the HMI and true in the data layer. All right, so that concludes the Getting Started tutorial for PROCON-WEB on the ctrlX Core platform. Hopefully you all learned a lot, and this will get you moving in the right direction.